Hi everyone, welcome to a poker vlog with a bit of a difference. Poker with kids.
Fuck it, let's go. Don't tease me. Let's play some fucking cards.
Welcome back to the vlog. This time, vlog number 25. Looking at some tournaments that I played up here on the Gold Coast. Managed to actually get through 4 in the 1 week. Bit of a change from what I had been doing. But to start off with, and what the original tournament that actually kind of got me out of the house and playing some pub poker was an event by WPT League. I know they're sort of the opposition to the company I work for, poker-wise, but the thing that I like with WPT League is they try some different things. It's not just always the same No Limit Holdem tournaments that you see all over the place. So the one that got me out of the house was a short deck tournament. If you go back to my previous vlog, that was one of the events that I played at the APT series up the Gold Coast earlier in the year, and it was one that worked out best for me because I came home with the trophy. So thought I'd give short deck another go and see how that went. It actually went pretty well. The structure they had was interesting. It was a $25 buy-in with a $10 rebuy or add-on option. 42 players, so a pretty decent turnout. And I think most of the players actually did the add-on or the rebuy. There were probably about 10 that didn't, so you're looking at about 30 or so rebuys or add-ons. Ended up making it to the final table, but fell in 5th place for what was effectively a min cash $50. So I'll go through a few hands in a little bit, but not a bad start to the week. Obviously, nice to cash and nice to make a final table and make some cash. Although it would have been nicer to go a little bit deeper, but we'll see some things that happened at the final table in particular a little bit later when I get to looking at some hands. Second event that I played was also a WPT League event. This was actually an Omaha event, and something that they do for these, like not the major events, but these just regular events, is they play it as No Limit Omaha. I think it's the whole confusion that people have with figuring out, okay, what is the maximum that they can bet if it's pot limit and things like that. So to remove the confusion, they just treat it like it's, No Limit Holdem, so you can just bet whatever as long as you're betting at least a big blind. So it does change the dynamic slightly. Ordinarily with pot limit Omaha, especially in the early levels, even if people are raising, first player in with a raise, normally if you've got some sort of reasonable hand, you'd be happy to see a flop. Whereas if it's a no limit, then you can actually be sort of priced out if people decide to do the whole I'll put in the big bet, and often cases they'll just take down a small pot, but every now and again someone's like, okay, I just have a calling hand, whether it's 3 times the big blind or 10 times the big blind, it's still a calling hand, which obviously is where you get some of the value in these pub poker things, where people just, as I said before in some earlier vlogs, people just don't adjust to different things. But anyway, the Omaha tournament again went pretty well. Smaller turnout than the short deck, but again they ended up running it 6-handed. They had I think it was 24 players altogether that played. Ended up as I said, running it 6-handed. They were going to make a 7-handed final table, and actually ended up bubbling the final table, finishing 8th. But again, have a look at some things from that tournament a little bit later. Next tournament that I played during the week was Monday night at Southport Sharks with APL. This is actually a game that I've hosted on occasion. And again, decent turnout, just under, I think it's just under 40 players. Managed to make the final table, but yeah, and missed the money. Ended up, I think I finished 6th or 7th at that one. So again, I'll run through a few things a little bit later when we get to looking at some hands. And finally, Thursday night at Varsity Lakes Tavern. This was what they consider a high roller event, or relative to the usual APL events. So $55 buy-in, and even though I had a good start, it as tournaments sometimes do. It went south pretty quickly and ended up nowhere near the final table at all and had a pretty early night. In terms of looking at some hands, I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time. Rather than, obviously, I don't have a whole card footage for some of these things. So I thought I'd do something different. Got myself a new deck of Cope cards. Thanks, Jack's Poker, for the order. And I'll use those and run through some hands, give you a bit of a different look at things. Again, something I picked up from the Vlogger in Paradise from a little while back. But see how it goes in terms of a little bit of different presentation. Okay, so here we are with a brand new deck of Cope cards from friends at Jack's Poker. Big thanks to Jack's Poker for the poker supplies. Also, the deck of cards, also the chips I'm using are from a set that they sell, even though they're mostly gone. These ones are called the Mint. Really nice set from Jack's Poker, something I might have a look at in a future video, a little bit about poker supplies. But again, thanks to Jack's for the chips. These first hands are a bit of a painful one, but something that you sometimes just have to do in poker. This is from the final table bubble of the short deck tournament at Paradise Point. I'm in the big blind. I think the blinds at the time were 15 and 30,000. It's folded around to the small blind, who decides to just complete the 30,000. I have a look down at two red aces. Pretty good holding ordinarily in most forms of poker. Short deck is definitely one of them. I decide to raise an extra 50,000 on top, which my friend in the small blind decides to call. We see a flop, which is Queen of Clubs, 10 of Clubs, 9 of Spades. Not exactly the greatest flop for aces, especially in short deck. Obviously there's a flush draw, there's a straight potentially on the board with King Jack or Jack 8, hands that again are reasonably playable in short deck. However, I decide to, after it's checked to me, bet another 50k, which my opponent decides to call. We find a good news, bad news card on the turn. It is the Ace of Clubs. Now, given that we're playing short deck, that means I'm now betting the straights, because in short deck, at least the way that it's played at WPT, trips beat a straight. So trip aces beats, I now have King Jack beaten, I've now got Jack 8 beaten. However, a flush beats a full house or trip. So if someone does have a flush already, I'm drawing the one out. The only way I can win is to make quads with the final ace in the deck. So I decide, once it's checked to me, I decide to check it. I'm not sure if it's the right move. However, I don't think it would have actually changed if I did bet. I think my opponent's calling anyway. And we get to the river, and again, the good news, bad news card. 9 of Clubs. And my opponent, who was the big stake at the time, decides to overbet the pot. He bets, I think, 250k on the river. Now I've got a bit of a dilemma. Obviously I've got the best full house. Obviously I can't beat quad 9s, but given that the short deck, I can't beat any club. So if my opponent has just one club in the hand, I'm dead. So given that it was so close to the final table, at this stage I still had a reasonable stack, not a big stack by any stretch of the imagination, especially having put in 130,000 already into this hand. I decided to a bit reluctantly let it go, but my opponent's nice enough and he actually shows the king of clubs for the nut flush. So he actually flopped middle pair, called, obviously happy to check the turn, and then got there on the river. But again, one of those situations that you'd really like to go a little bit differently. would have been nice to pick up that pot and go into the final table with what would have been one of the bigger stacks, but as it worked out, I went to the final table with one of the shorter stacks and still did alright, but again, something that could have been better, but sometimes you just have to make those tough folds. This is actually from the short deck final table. By this stage we were 5-handed, and in terms of table dynamics, the player to my right had been playing quite a few hands, but for the most part had been playing them fairly aggressively. A lot of the other players at the table had been playing fairly passively, at least pre-flop. In these games, I tend to play a bit passively pre-flop, but again, it's a kind of game that the flop makes a big difference. So where I tend to play either more aggressively is after the flop. So where the hand's far more defined. Short deck, really, almost any 2 cards are playable. Obviously, some a lot more playable than others, but you can almost get away with playing any 2 cards. So in this hand, I was actually in the small blind, folded around to the button, who did something a bit unusual. He actually called. The blinds are 20,000, 40,000. He called on the button. I looked down at Jack 10 offsuit. Not a bad hand for short deck. Obviously suited would be better, but Jack 10 suited, really good for making straights, and obviously that's for the most part your minimum holding that you really want to make in terms of hands. But again, Jack 10, if you make a straight, it's always going to be the nuts if you use both those cards. So whether it's Ace King Queen and you've got the Jack 10, whether it's the other and you've got 9 8 7, and again, so whenever you make a straight with Jack 10, you're making the nuts. So really useful, particularly in short deck when straights are really the sort of the minimum big hand that people play. I decided I had around about 180,000 to start the hand. I did something a bit unusual because the button had limped. I also decided to limp along as well. Big blind checked their option, and we saw an interesting flop, which was King Jack 10 with 2 spades. Obviously, being small blind, I was first to act. I decided that I would ship it, went in for my remaining 140. Big blind folded, and the small blind called, and turned over pocket aces. Really unusual way to play pocket aces, especially at a final table. Obviously, getting in 2 pair against 1 pair, but there are a lot of outs. Obviously, ace for trips. Remembering in short deck, the trips beats ace straight. Obviously, you've got a queen for straight. Also, it could come a king for a bigger 2 pair. It also could come running cards, again, to make a bigger 2 pair, because obviously the ace as an overpair is going to beat my jacks and 10s. So, we've got a bit of a sweat on. Remember, there's not so many cards in the deck, so we aren't going to get a 4 on the turn on river. So, there's a limit to the number of cards that come out on the turn on river. As it went, we had 9 on the turn, 8 on the river, 2 pairs good. So managed to double up there, but an interesting way to play those pocket aces. This next hand is literally the very next hand after doubling up with the Jack 10 against the aces. Folds around to the same player in the cutoff, who decides to just open shove for, I think it was around 400, 500,000. Open shove pre-flop. I'm on the button, have a look down at pocket aces. So, yes, I have just doubled up, but I'm putting my stack in as well. He did have me covered, even though I had doubled up and a little bit from the previous hand, he did still have me covered. The blinds both folded, and he turns over King Jack suited. So should be in pretty good shape. So aces against king jack suited. Not quite as good odds wise as would be in regular Holdem, because again there's less cards, and again a flush does actually beat a full house. So if he does make a flush with his suited king jack, obviously that's going to beat any kind of full house that I might be able to make with aces. And then we get to the flop. Flop comes out jack, king, and a jack. He's managed to flop a full house, and I'm literally drawing the 2 outs. Unfortunately, they didn't come on the turn or river, and I'm out, busted with aces. Funnily enough, out of the 3 short deck tournaments that I've played, twice I've busted out with aces, and given that I actually won the other tournament, the only hand I've actually busted a short deck tournament is with aces. I remember back at the first APT event where they ran it, actually busted aces against jacks again, all in pre-flop, and the guy actually managed to flop quad jack. So I love playing against jacks in short deck. But that was the end of my short deck tournament. Came home in 5th place, picked up what should have been a min cash, actually agreed amongst the players to put in a 6th place with effectively money back. So $50 for 5th place, not bad for a night out, but again, could have been so much better. Next hand I want to have a look at was from the APL game at Southport Sharks. This one's from the final table. The blinds are 10 and 20,000, and I'm in the small blind. It folds around to the button, who decides to limp in for 20,000. Have a look down at ace 10. Decide, well, everybody's limped. The button's called, no one else is there. I'm getting pretty short. From memory, I only had 80,000 total. So I'm all in. Big blind folds. And then the button starts doing the little muck around with the chips a bit. And then says, I call. At which point the dealer starts to deal the cards. Flop comes down, ace, 6, and a 7. Now this time the old mate on the button is sitting there, he's fumbling around with his chips, he's still fumbling around with his chips, still hasn't turned over his cards, and the dealer continues with a 4. Now he's still fumbling around with his chips, trying to make sure that he puts out his 80,000 in chips, he's fumbling around with his chips and all that sort of stuff. Dealer turns over an 8. I've obviously got one pair, aces with a mediocre kicker. I'm thinking, okay, there's a chance I'm good. He hasn't turned over his cards yet. He's been tottering around with his chips as though he's ready to hand them over. Having said that, the board is a little bit scary for just top pair with an average kicker. Obviously, even if he does have an ace, there's a lot of 2-pair combinations. Any 5 makes a straight. Very easy to make 2-pair with a hand like 7-8, 6-7, something like that. Obviously, if he's got a middle pocket pair, he's good chance he's flopped a set. So I'm happily doing that. Finally, once the river's out, he then decides to start to turn over his cards. And he turns over an ace, one at a time. Turns over the ace, I'm thinking, okay, if you just turn over the ace, maybe there's a chance I'm good. And then turns over the jack. And I get slow rolled out of the tournament in 7th place. So not only a fun one to end up losing ace 10 against ace jack, but the little needle with the slow roll and the old dottery guy that's, you know, worried about the chips, not just, hey, I've got ace jack, you've got ace 10, I'm in front, I don't need to count chips because I'm just going to win them. So he spends all this time dottering around, putting out the chips while the dealer gets on with the game and deals out the board, and here I am thinking I've got a chance, and I was actually drawing pretty slim and ended up going home. So a little bit of a disappointing finish to that one, although again, nice to make a final table. Would have been nice to come over with some money, but oh well, a final table again was another reasonable result. This next hand comes from the No Limit Holdem game at the Varsity Tavern. This one's fairly early on in the tournament. Blinds are 100, 200. We're playing six-handed. I'm actually under the gun and have a look down at pocket 10. So I decide to raise it up to 600. Folds around to the button, and the button makes the call, and the blinds both fold. Flop comes out, rather interesting, 6, 10, 10. One of these, one big problem with tournaments is not only getting the right cards at the right time, or being in a situation where you're getting slightly better hands than your opponents, because if your opponents really have nothing, there's nothing that they're not going to put in chips regardless of how strong your hand is. It's a lot of players just play their cards, so it's very difficult to get chips in at times if people don't actually make some sort of hand. A board like this, obviously, it's pretty much the best flop I'm looking for. Can't really, really unlikely I'm going to get beaten by anything, regardless of what the run it is. So I check the flop, and the button decides to bet 1200. Obviously not a lot of choice as far as things to do, so I decide to just call the 1200. The turn, to be honest, I don't actually remember what the turn and river were because it's largely irrelevant, but the turn came out, hand got checked through, and then the river, I decided to bet 2k, and my opponent called. I rolled over the quad 10s, everybody went, ooh, wow, wow. I skipped in the pot. However, it's one of those ones where, yes, you are picking up a pot that's decent relative to the blinds. In this case, let me do some quick maths. So looking at a pot that is, what, 6, 7, close to 8,000, 7,000, 7,900 with blinds at 100, 200. So almost a 40 big blind pot. However, it's early on in the tournament. Really, yes, it helps add to your stack, but if you can add 40 big blinds to your stack at a later stage, it's much more important. So this is the dilemma of tournaments. All well and good to make quads, all well and good to win a reasonable sized pot, 40 big blinds or thereabouts. However, the fact that it's one of the early levels, it's only 100, 200, means that, yes, it adds a little bit to your stack, but it doesn't really dent your opponents or make a big sizable jump one way or the other for your position in the tournament. Final hand for the vlog is my bust out hand from Varsity Lakes. By this stage I've got pretty short, sitting in the big blind. Blinds are 1,000, 2,000. I've only got 14,000 total, so really looking at a push or fold situation. So this hand, it folds around to the big blind. He's literally just picked up a couple of limps and shoved pre-flop to take down the hand. The previous hand, which has almost doubled him up, and he just has me covered. He decides to shove from the button. Small blind folds. I look down at pocket kings, and of course I'm making the call. He turns over the old ace-7 offsuit, and you can imagine what's going to happen. And just to make it just that little much better, it all happens on the river. So the board runs out 975, gives him a little bit of extra outs with the 7. Queen or some big card on the turn, and of course ace on the river to send me packing. So even though in that tournament I'd flopped quads a bit earlier, again, doesn't really make a difference as earlier in the tournament. So this is one of the dilemmas of tournament poker. Not only getting big hands against hands that are going to pay you off, but finding the timing that it's going to be at a stage of the tournament where it's really going to help your chip stack, and not up in a situation where ordinarily you'd love getting it all in with kings against ace rag, but yeah, sometimes things just don't work out for you. So that was maybe not such a great tournament, but that's how tournament poker is sometimes. That's going to wrap up vlog number 25. Hopefully we get the next vlog out a little bit sooner than the break between the last two. So see you again soon with some more poker content.